If I walk in the pathway of duty, if I work to the close of the day, I shall see the great King in his beauty. When I've gone the last mile of the way, when I've gone the last mile of the way, I'll rest. I said I'll rest. I'm gonna rest. I'll rest at the close of the day. And I know there are joys, Lord, waiting for me when I've gone the last mile of the way.
Welcome to Plain Talk About Life in the Bible. I want to say a special hello to Mary Jo at Cafe Buongiorno in Winnetka. I hope you're watching. And also to Pauline Haas again, who's been very kind, and to Jim Hazelwood, who's always faithful and watching and pointing out if something is amiss. And likewise Sasha, who will let me know if we're running reruns when we're not supposed to. My daughter, I appreciate that. What would I do without all this shepherding? I like it, and I'm glad you guys do it. The subject we're going to take up today is something I really am happy to do. In fact, I'm excited as I've been about anything, and that is we're going to begin a series on Pilgrims Progress. Now, if you could guess that the Bible is the single most translated book in the history of mankind, that would be pretty good guessing, but not superior guessing. But if I had asked you prior to this, what's the second most translated book from English to all other languages, few of you probably would have guessed Pilgrims Progress, because few of you today are probably aware of this book even. The book was written by a man named John Bunyan, who lived, well, he was born in 1628 and he died in 1688. So if you remember that your part of the world didn't come into being, the United States, until 100 years after his death almost, it'll give you an idea of the time, although the English were over here then, settlers in this country. It is early on in the history of Christianity still, well, I shouldn't say in England, it's not early on in the Reformation period. It's actually since we can trace it back to the early 1500s. But by this time, we start to have trouble politically in England, and the Church of England and the struggle with independent churches is taking place, and different kings are being raised up and deposed, and all of that will factor into this man's life, John Bunyan. And I'll tell you more about his life later on. But the name Pilgrims Progress is really a reflection, after you get to know Bunyan's life, of his life as he was drawn by God into Christianity, as he was troubled by his sin, as he learned to grapple with that, the experiences he felt, only it's done in the form of an allegory. An allegory being a sort of a book-length poem where he makes certain characteristics turn out to be characters. For instance, we'll meet people like Mr. Ready to Halt, Mr. Feeble Mind, excuse me, Mr. Worldly Wise. You get the idea. Obstinate, pliable, Mr. Hypocrite, Miss Wanton. You know, we meet all these characters. So, if you will, bear with me, and we'll begin this. If you watch the show with any regularity, you'll know that one of the themes I'm always trying to impress upon myself is the idea that we're pilgrims in this world, that we're just traveling through, that this world is an unsubstantial, really nothing sort of a world compared to the next world, that we were made for the next world, that this was never intended to be your home or mine. So to keep with that, you wonder, this Pilgrim's Progress, it's a progress from a starting point in a man's life to a finishing point, in this case, in Bunyan's story, in the celestial city, when he arrives at the gates of heaven. But the biblical idea behind it comes from several passages, one of them being 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. I'll read it to you. Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. You can see that Peter is here warning his readers that to abstain from fleshly lusts that war against their soul's best interest. And he's saying it under this language of seeing yourself as a sojourner, as a pilgrim who's traveling through a land that's not his homeland. This isn't your homeland, this earth. It's just a place you're going through. If you can imagine your life that way, and if I can imagine my life that way, it will not only heighten our awareness of our real homeland, but it will make us treat the things of this earth as they ought to be treated. As I say, I'm trying to educate myself to think of everything and everyone I see under this umbrella. What will I think of this thing or this person or this situation 5 minutes after I'm dead? Now think about that. 5 minutes after I'm dead, John standing over here, will John be of any consequence to me? You bet. John has a soul. He has an eternal consequence to me. But the sofa he's leaning against or the camera that he's using to film this with, they'll all be of no use to me 5 minutes after I'm dead. Neither will the gold that I have, neither will the money that's in my bank mean anything to me. Neither will the good work that Lois does for people. It'll all be inconsequential compared to the things of eternity. And none of these things of this world pass through to eternity. You pass through to eternity. So we need to recognize the value that people have and the relative lack of value that everything else that you see with your eyes has. It has no intrinsic value. It only has the value you place on it. And when it helps you through this world and helps you on your way to heaven, it's a great thing. But if the things of this world help you on your way to hell, then they turn out to be a cursing rather than a blessing, didn't they? That's how you have to view the things of this world. Here he says, Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims. Back in chapter 1, when he begins this letter, Peter actually begins this first letter of 1 Peter with this language. To the pilgrims of the dispersion. See, he addresses the people of the dispersion, and he says to them, the churches of the dispersion, and he says, to the pilgrims. Why? Well, he's reminding them that that's their status in this world. God sees them as pilgrims, coming from a foreign land to their homeland. They're going through a dangerous land. Do you see yourself that way? I have to push myself to see myself that way because I tend to want to think of this earth as my homeland when in fact I know intellectually it's not my homeland. I know intellectually that it's just a place I'm passing through, and it's full of thorns and briars and troubling times and troubling people. But it's all something that the Lord has ordained on my way home. And as your Christians that are listening, you have to view it that way. If you're a non-Christian who's listening, you need to see yourself as a pilgrim who's headed home. You're headed to hell. That's your home. It's where you belong. It's where you'll go unless God intervenes and changes your heart and you change your life. If those things don't happen, you'll go home. You're just on your way home. You don't stay here permanently either. It's something we neglect to tell you in truthfulness. We act like you have a homeland here and we have a homeland there. This isn't your homeland either. Your homeland is fire and brimstone and the wrath of God to come and eternal misery. And there's no getting around it if the Bible be true at all, and certainly it is true. That's your homeland. That's where you're racing for. And you're nearing that, and you're in danger of going there at every turn. So Peter wants you to remind all of us that we're pilgrims. Now, I'm going to show you another passage that people are very fond of quoting with regard to this, and for good reason. That's Hebrews chapter 11. Let me read it to you like this. This is starting at verse 13 of Hebrews chapter 11. These all died in faith, meaning the saints in the past, the patriarchs, for example, Abraham and Sarah, the people who lived by faith. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had the opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. So here we have these people, the patriarchs, who lived in faith that God was faithful to His promises, that He prepared a place for them. But it wasn't the homeland they came from. In Abraham's case, the Ur of the Chaldees, he wasn't going to return there. He could have, according to the writer of Hebrews. That wasn't the land he referred to. It certainly wasn't the promised land that God had laid out for him on this earth, because they weren't able to keep full possession of their promises, their whole stay here. So he knows that it's a city that God's made in a different place, the celestial city. And when you go back to verse 10, it works like this. It said of him, for he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. That's what Abraham was waiting for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. The idea that we're sojourners here, strangers here, is very helpful if we can use that language. I don't know many churches that use that language today. Sometimes you'll find a Pilgrims Rest Holiness Church, I think it's called, I've seen, or you'll see that Pilgrims Rest at a burial site. And that's apropos. A pilgrim has come to rest. The body's come to rest and he's gone home. He's escaped the boundaries of this world and gone home. He served his time in this world and gone home.